Hello and welcome. I'm Jahnavi sent from The Wire. Since the 3rd of May, when ethnic conflict broke out in Manipur, the state has been witnessing an internet shutdown. To talk about that with me today is Apar Gupta, the founder and director of the Internet Freedom Foundation. Thanks for coming, Apar.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So the government has been saying that this shutdown is required
Yes.
to quell the spread of disinformation and rumors and
Yes.
visuals that might be provocative.
Yes.
But you've been quite critical of it on
Yes.
social media and
Yes.
on the Internet Freedom Foundation's website. Can you
Yes.
explain why that is?
Okay, so let us first understand how do people access the internet in Manipur. So
Yeah.
as per the data published in May by the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, there are about 2.2 million internet users there.
Okay.
And the total pie of people who have connectivity is essentially people who have wireless, like smartphone based coverage, being 2.36, and about 0.4 million on wired. So which means that most people are actually using it through their mobile phones.
Right.
Now on May 3rd, the government first issued an order to prohibit mobile internet based access, which means that most people in Manipur did not have internet access, and till date they don't have access. This is the first point I'm making, because a lot of people outside Manipur think that people already have access to the internet because of that viral clip which has come out of Manipur. People still don't have access.
Yeah.
Now, secondly, the orders, which is your question, under which the internet access has been prohibited, these orders are issued for the term of every week, and let us look at their nature. The nature of the order is for the entire state of Manipur rather than individual districts. There are 18 districts in Manipur.
Yeah.
The order includes all modes of internet access as originally was there, modified by the High Court, which means wired, leased-lined, wireless. The order also is not specific and limited to a few applications or websites. It's for all internet services by itself. Again, I come to the nature of duration, 78 days.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let us look at the reasons, now that we understand the restriction.
Yeah.
The orders essentially every week are extended. So it's for a 5-day period. So for instance, orders were extended on May 21st and then May 26th. And they contain the same reasons. These reasons are, and I'm quoting, thwart the design and activities of anti-national and anti-social elements by stopping the spread of disinformation and false rumors through various social media platforms. Now, this reason is present in the May 21st order, the May 26th order, and subsequently in the June orders as well.
Okay.
It's the same reason.
Right.
There's no specificity, there's no data. Now, go back to the nature of the restriction. Look at the templatized or cyclo-styled orders in which there are minor deviations. Notice the absence of any specificity. Which lives were saved? How many lives were saved? Which incidents required the internet shutdown to be placed? Which is what makes me question quite often the good faith and the intent of the government in these stated reasons as to the objective of the internet shutdown. It is my view that the internet shutdown serves the cause of national apathy towards what's occurring in Manipur rather than any stated purpose of restoring law and order.
Right. I mean, we saw that the FIR on the incident you mentioned that's in the viral video was filed in May, 2 weeks after it occurred, by the husband of one of the survivors.
Yes.
And yet action was taken after the horrific clip went viral on social media. So yeah, I can see where you're coming from on that. But what do you think the day-to-day sort of realities are for people living without internet? And would they look very different if, like, say, do you think violence would in fact increase if people were allowed to use the internet as they would?
The violence through any mode of communication is likely to be more if the medium of communication by itself is not utilized in a proper form.
Right.
And here I think there was a huge role to be played and still needs to be played by the state government in giving specific information in terms of there is relief, calming the situation, deploying security forces to ensure that law and order is restored when there are incidents of violence, in terms of greater public accountability being forced on state government by itself.
Right.
I think there is also a critical role of the internet in ensuring a much more national participation in the lives of people in Manipur, which was prevented due to this internet shutdown. For instance, a lot of fact-checking capacity exists both within traditional news organizations as well as specific fact-checking units.
Right.
They're not able to debunk all rumors, but they're able to specifically prioritize those which attain a very high level of popularity and are aimed towards sowing any kind of division within society based on any groups of classifiers of identity. Now just look at the viral clip itself. That viral clip itself depicts sexual violence against two women of one community by another community. There is a news report in NewsClick which is dated, I think so, June 1st, and the incident is purportedly of May 3rd. And the June 1st report from a person, academic from Manipur, actually recounts instances stretching all across that week and says that the purported justification, no, the purported pretext, there's never justification. And even here purported was misinformation. Were other clips.
Right.
So one community acting on another. And it was not debunked. At least the village elders would have had a voice saying that you are using completely false justification, which is your pretext to commit an act of sexual violence. Disinformation sows more disinformation. Actually, the justifications which have been provided in the internet shutdown orders counterintuitively are reinforced. More rumors spread, more disinformation spreads because fact-checking is not done by the local press, which cannot report it effectively. It cannot put it on the internet. The NewsClick report itself may not have reached groups on June 1st itself. And the national resources which we have cannot be deployed towards this.
You mentioned at the start of your first answer that people are not always aware that the shutdown is continuing. And perhaps one of the reasons for that is that on July 7th, the Manipur High Court had an order that said the internet should be partially restored in a phased manner based on the report of an expert committee that they had appointed. And then later, when the Manipur government went to the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court said it would not intervene with the High Court's order. So could you explain what's happening with that, what the order said about what is partial restoration in this case?
So partial restoration is no restoration. That's one thing I want to make very clear, and let me now support it. So the case which is being referred is called Aribam Dhananjoy Sharma versus State of Manipur and others. It came to be filed around May 19. There were 11 hearings, including the hearing on July 7th when the order was passed. Before the July 7th hearing, Jahnavi, they did constitute an expert committee. But the objective of that legal challenge was by the petitioners to the internet shutdown itself. And we must remember the proper role of judicial review is to judge the legality of the internet shutdown order. Firstly, whether it is within the purview of the administrative framework, the telecom suspension rules of 2017, the statutory power, section 5(2) of the Telegraph Act, or the Constitution of India, Article 19. The High Court is not concerned with these inquiries of judicial review. It, from the very second hearing, has always framed this as whether it is possible to provide limited use of internet service to the public by barring the usage of social media websites. And here what is important to focus on is to the public. And why this becomes again important is in our first part of this interaction, I had stated the teleconnectivity breakup of Manipur in which most people access it through mobile devices. So what is limited restoration as per the High Court in its July 7th order is for leased line access to be restored, which means that commercial and institutional establishments which usually pay a very heavy cost to an internet service provider in which they only get internet connectivity from a local station to their offices will get access. Secondly, fiber to home, which is again a minuscule minority of internet access which is available for users, and mobile internet remains banned. The High Court with respect to the third has said, please do a trial for whitelisting in which the State Department itself will say which mobile numbers will get internet access. And here I think it is important for us to consider. I'm a little I'm a little reluctant to comment on this because I'm not aware of the political situation in Manipur in terms of the secretarian division there. But there have been allegations of partisanship on the state government and the Home Department and the police forces. Thereby, the High Court order of July 7th does not lay down any guidelines for whitelisting and entrusts this power to the state government. Today, there is no internet access as per the High Court, to the public by itself, as it's framed this inquiry. There is no limited restoration. And the small slivers of information which are coming through are basically spotty at best. I think it comes through from people who either connect to a Wi-Fi over an institution, etc., things like that. The internet is still shut down in Manipur. Secondly, the Supreme Court, and I think this is what is important. What is the role of the Supreme Court? I find it disappointing the Supreme Court has also not judged the legality of internet shutdown orders, not only in Manipur, but even in Jammu and Kashmir. So lawyers always said that that judgment by itself was very unsatisfactory because the court...
Referring to the Anuradha Bhasin
Yes,
judgment.
exactly. So the Anuradha Bhasin judgment concerning the internet shutdown in Jammu and Kashmir, essentially if you look at the end, the court, which is the ratio and directions, the court does not judge the legality of even one shutdown order. And we must remember, Anuradha Bhasin did not lead to the restoration of access in Jammu and Kashmir. It took a progeny of cases and in fact a social media kind of reputational kind of a pressure on the government of India, including tweets by Rihanna. Let us remember that. So the court by itself did not judge the legality of the orders, and it said the state government itself will assess and determine it. So the institutional culture of the courts has not been to put the executive to account. Secondly, in the Anuradha Bhasin judgment also, I found it very, very disturbing that the court said that examine if limited access can be given to educational websites, etc., banking websites, and technical affidavits showed that they didn't work. Just like it was not partial restoration. Technically, people could not access it because it was limited to a list, the access speeds were deteriorated, etc., etc. And today, what the Supreme Court has done in the Manipur case, as it even hears the much more broader case on the violence itself, which is in the Manipur Tribal Forum, I don't understand why it does not hear the internet shutdown taking in Manipur. It is an inherent element of the case. On July 10th, in the updated status report filed by the state of Manipur before the Supreme Court, in para 7, the state government itself says that the internet shutdown is a principal security measure enforced by us. So, why will the court not look towards it when a specific plea is brought to it? Secondly, the Chief Minister in its press interaction even yesterday said hundreds of these incidents have happened and this is why we have banned the internet. Their answer to everything is banning the internet. So why will the court, concerned with the violence which is taking place in Manipur, asking for numbers of people who are killed, arson which is caused, not also go into this inquiry? I think it is inconsistent with its larger objective. So this is why I find it disappointing that the court is not placing accountability.
You mentioned while talking about what the legal response has been that the courts aren't really looking at the orders and whether they're legally justifiable. So speaking of these orders, and I mean, I know Manipur is now an extreme reaction, an extreme situation, as was Jammu and Kashmir, which the Anuradha Bhasin case was about. But we see internet shutdowns all over the country, used for shorter durations because the violence is not of the same scale as what we're seeing in Manipur. But we see them all the time. And so speaking of these internet shutdown orders themselves, what are the laws under which they're used? What sort of justification are they supposed to provide, and do you think they're passing muster?
So, Jahnavi, just some statistics, because internet shutdowns are also articulated as incongruent with the statements of the Union Executive to build a digital India and the harm to the economy. In 2022 alone, there have been about 1,533 hours of internet shutdowns in India that have cost the country a total of about 18.43 crores or 184 million US dollars. This is in dollars. And in some, the country till now has at least suffered a loss from 2019 to 2022 of about 4.8 billion US dollars economic impact by itself. So while we may think that, okay, it may happen in Jammu and Kashmir, it may happen in Manipur, it may happen in Punjab if you are looking for a vigilante who's who has an armed group cult of sorts. But I think they are much more normal. They are across the breadth of this country. They are being used by state governments for all kinds of things. In Bihar, it is used to prevent cheating in exams. In Rajasthan, it is used to quell communal violence at specific instances. We did a qualitative and quantitative study with Human Rights Watch as Internet Freedom Foundation. We filed RTIs and it was very limited. We asked that these Anuradha Bhasin directions, which is from the Jammu and Kashmir case, basic transparency. If you pass a shutdown order, do you publish it, right? And do you constitute a review committee, which is a procedural safeguard. So the officer which is issuing this shutdown order needs to transmit it to a senior committee, which will then examine whether the shutdown was actually necessary. Review committees have not been constituted in many states. Review committees do not publish their orders as well. And this is just resulting in a form of, I would say, administrative control, which is very reminiscent of a colonial framework in which we are not presuming that people who are citizens of India are allowed freedom of speech and expression or have the ability to demand accountability from governments, or our governments are not being able to properly perform their official functions in terms of maintenance of law and order or even preventing cheating in an exam or a paper from leaking. So they're just shutting down the internet. So I do think it's a wider problem. The Standing Committee on IT actually gave a report on it, which is a body of the Parliament of India, which was on December 1st, 2021. It gave 7 recommendations to the Department of Telecom and the Ministry of Home Affairs. And if you read the report, the Department of Telecom and the Ministry of Home Affairs are saying it's a law and order issue. We are not concerned. But the law actually has been made by them. They have made the telecom suspension rules, which have permitted the state governments to pass these orders without necessary safeguards. And telegraphs does fall under the union list. And they are very reticent in maintaining a central repository of internet shutdowns, commissioning a study on the economic impacts. And the Standing Committee of IT actually does then come out with an action taken report in February this year and says, please still do that. And one of the 7 recommendations they happen to make, because the DOT says, okay, maybe we don't shut down the entire internet, we only ban social media. But what is social media? How do we define it? Okay, so the DOT picks up steam on that. And in fact, there's an ongoing consultation with the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, because the DOT has said, the Standing Committee of an IT has said, we have not taken action. So please tell us, how can we shut down specific parts of the internet? So one can see that the state interest seems to be in controlling citizen behavior, the media ecology, and demands for accountability when they're emerging.
You've talked quite a bit about the broader costs, correct information not being able to get out. The statistic you mentioned the economic cost. But on a human level, what effect do you think these internet shutdowns are having?
So there are news reports in The Wire. There are news reports in, for instance, even leading newspapers such as Hindustan Times. There's a Hindustan Times article in which local students in Delhi University are not being able to pay for their rent. Working professionals are not being able to send money back home to Manipur. And let us please understand, for people who stay in metropolitan cities, that there's a large population of people who have left their families back home from other parts of India and come and work in Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, other cities, find employment and send money back home. Or the educational institutions are there. This is one of the impacts. The joint study we did with Human Rights Watch showed that even people who are relying on rations, for instance, because there's a large amount of electronic verification or digital verification through either biometrics, etc., sometimes don't get rations, don't get their entitlements, don't get access to the larger economic opportunity of participating in what is now, unfortunately, a gig economy. Because that has replaced more or less formal employment is,
Yes.
and even contract-based employment.
Yeah.
So even in B cities or C city, tier cities, that's the impact. There's a case which is filed in the Jammu and Kashmir, in the Supreme Court by the Jammu and Kashmir Private School Association, saying that the economic impact aside, the educational outcomes for children in Jammu and Kashmir have been set back by 2 years. Imagine they were just doing remote learning, and most studies are showing that there's a vast difference between remote learning and classroom learning. Absolutely. Especially for primary learners. So let us think about this as a real human problem. Now, even in conflict zones, the use of internet shutdowns and even the bans of social media is sometimes presumed as reasonable. Let me challenge that assumption once as well. Sometimes our mobile phones are also used to record instances, not only to depict the instance in order to shame a community, but also to show police inaction, police apathy, and place accountability. That is quite often done. Also in these kind of situations, and there are recorded instances in which families coordinate for relief, evacuation, they send messages back home, how communities coordinate by itself when they lack trust in the state by itself. So the internet serves this vital function of relief, rescue, and rehabilitation quite often, which is also absent.
Absolutely. I think you've made quite a compelling case on why an internet shutdown should not be a first trigger response in any sort of crisis situation, particularly one that just goes on and on endlessly, as we're seeing currently in Manipur. Would you say there are situations in which it does make sense at all?
I would think about it only because, see, I'm firstly reluctant to say that there are situations and define them which would justify internet shutdowns, because quite often these edge cases float to the center in terms of restrictions on civil liberties. The restriction itself has been our experience, becomes the rule, especially given that we are much more of a post-colonial state on our way to becoming a democracy than a democracy by itself, is my view. Now, let me define that condition. For me, an internet shutdown is similar to disruption of electricity. I wouldn't say water, but electricity. What situation justifies disruption of electricity for 78, 79 days ongoing? Wouldn't that put people back into a pre-industrialized, pre-digitized society by itself? So that is the way I would think about it. It would be a curfew, extreme power which requires gridlocking, is temporary, and requires very high levels of justification, transparency, judicial review to withstand. And I think for it to be ongoing essentially shows that the state has lost control by itself. And for that to happen, then it's unimaginable for me in India, given our military might, why we cannot restore law and order if there is political will which is present. I really think, Jahnavi, that the internet shutdown has continued national apathy towards Manipur, the people who have spoken up there, the people who have been protesting in Delhi, who have come to Delhi especially to protest here. So I think that there may be situations to justify internet shutdowns, but I think that's a conversation which can only happen after we first close this one chapter at least. I think that's a conversation which should be separated from what we're talking about today.
On the other side of the spectrum, the state of Kerala has recently said that it's going to be looking at the right to internet as akin to a fundamental right.
Yes.
What is your view on that? Do you think that is something that should gain wider popularity in political?
So yeah, definitely. Jahnavi, I think who I am today is due to the privilege I had socio-economically in early access to digital technologies. My life trajectory, my personality, and my interests would be very different if I did not get access to the internet when I was in the 10th and the 9th standard, when a very small minority of Indians had it. Young India, especially people who are early runners in their senior classes, need an integration of technology in order for their ability to develop their personality and interests in very different ways. And I think the internet gives you that opportunity. So I think the Kerala example needs to be appreciated, and we have to think about it from the entire spectrum of access itself, which begins with device, not only with respect to internet connectivity, which is after device. I also think it is very important because it then intermediates your access to a lot of services which are essential in our society today. So gender-based access, for instance, has been documented to be a relevant factor in vaccination in India. More men got vaccinated before women. Why? Because men had the smartphone, right? And we had a website called CoWIN. So between the 18 to 44 age group, when you're rationing medicine, men will first go and get vaccinated themselves. Then the wife will, which is a very patriarchal construct. So I think early access to the internet is actually a core necessity in ensuring that people have that equality, in that sense, an equal chance of participation in society. I'm really supportive of this measure. Whatever expands access, I think so. It's very foundational to where we will go tomorrow.
Okay, bye. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.